Welcome to my court today. My name is Judge Rook. And oftentimes, my cases may last hours, they may last days, they may last months. So it just depends what happened, what was the jury, what is it all about, the case all about, how many jurors I have to listen to, how much proof there was. But also, I could take a recess. I have to have a recess for lunch, and since it may go on for days and days, then at night I have a recess, what's called a recess. Now, I am not to talk about, nor any of my jurors, to talk about the case. Once it's over, once you leave the courtroom, you are not to talk about the case. But I have to take a little longer recess today. Before I take my recess, I want to ask us if we can remember the big question. What did Jesus do to save you and me? There's three parts to this answer.
He lived a sinless life.
That's it. He lived a sinless life.
He rose from the dead.
And everybody?
He died on the cross.
Okay, we got those a little out of order, but he lived a sinless life, he died on the cross, and he rose from the dead. Now, that has to happen in order. That happens in order for a reason. Okay? He had to live a sinless life. Then he had to die a terrible death, even though he lived a sinless life. And then he had to rise from the dead. That's the whole story of our salvation. Without that, we would not be here today. We would not have the hope we have. So, I'm going to take a long recess now, and I am now going to change from a judge into Jesus. So, if you people on this benches would turn around, please. I asked Peter and John this morning to go ahead of us and find a man carrying a jug of water. They found that man, and then he led them to a house. The man that owned the house said, "Yes, I have a room for you. It has furniture in it. You may prepare a meal." So Peter and John went ahead and started preparing the meal. Jesus and the rest of his disciples came to the table. I'm going to ask you, if possible, would you please take off your shoes? As you entered my room this afternoon, evening, and your feet were dirty, so we want to just take our shoes off. Now, we are going to have a feast, and this is called the Passover. We are all in Jerusalem for the Passover. Do you recall what the Passover is all about? But they were in Jerusalem for the Passover. Why were they in Jerusalem for the Passover? They didn't know anything about this Last Supper yet. But they were in Jerusalem. Jesus and his disciples and many, many people were in Jerusalem for the Passover.
Because this is where he grew up most of his life?
Not really. What was the Passover? Celebrating something that happened in the Old Testament. I think we talked about this last Sunday. Jackson. And the last plague, there was 10 plagues. The last plague was what? What? Talk? I can't hear you. You're fast.
Firstborn son is gonna die.
Right. The firstborn son in every home was to die. Except what happened?
The people who spread the lamb's blood over their.
Okay. They had to kill a lamb and put blood over the doorway. And that way the angel of death would pass over that house and not kill the firstborn. So Jesus said, you've got to remember that. You've got to celebrate it forever, the Passover. So this is why they're in Jerusalem. Now, Jesus called his 12 disciples together, and he said, I have told you stories, lessons, again and again, that I'm going to die, and in 3 days I'm going to rise from the dead, and you still don't understand me. This is a little more closer to what I've been trying to tell you. At the Passover, what did they have to eat or not eat at the Passover?
They had bread and wine.
What kind of bread? Not just any bread. Unleavened bread. What is unleavened bread? It's bread with no yeast. Why did Jesus, or God at that time, why did God tell them to eat unleavened bread?
Because it represented Jesus' body's medicine.
Not yet. He hasn't died yet in the Old Testament. Because this was the last plague, and they were going to get let out to freedom. So he said, you do not have time to bake bread and let the yeast rise. Yeast rises, because a lot of you know, we've talked about this too. Yeast rises, so most of your bread that you eat, the regular bread, not like your mom makes banana bread or something, you don't use yeast, but the regular bread that you eat has yeast in it, and it rises. God said, you don't have time to let that rise. You're going to be exiting out of Egypt into freedom. So you have to eat unleavened bread. Also, I know Jesus didn't have Google, but I looked it up on Google, and it said that leavened bread was like sinful, and unleavened bread was like not sinful. That's what it said. So, today, due to what's coming up soon, I have brought some symbols of what I want you to always remember when you, after my death. So, Deacon, here. Give everybody a napkin, please. Do not eat this until I ask you to. May. Okay, just hold it like this and let them take carefully. Split right there, let them take a cracker. Just with, and today when most of our churches celebrate communion, we have a cracker. Cracker does not have yeast in it, or some kind of little thing, because it does not have yeast in it. Oh yes. One of you disciples is going to betray me. And Peter said, did you get one? Yeah. Okay. What did Peter say? Not me. Jesus said, yes, you will betray me 3 times. Okay. He was really talking about who?
Peter.
Judas. Somebody is going to betray me. They're going to turn me over to the soldiers. Okay. Jesus said, take this bread as a symbol of my body. So you may eat your cracker. As long as you live, you are to remember me in this way. So as you're eating your cracker, I want you to think of the stories that I have shared with you, that you're going to share with, after I leave you, with my followers and with other people, with the Gentiles. There was Palm Sunday, which is according to God's plan. And we've had many lessons. Last week we had the lesson of the lost coin, that I don't want any of my people to be lost. If there is a soul lost, I have to find it. And we had to find the sheep last week. And we had the story of the prodigal son, whose father is like our Heavenly Father and rejoiced if we sin and stray. We are always welcome back. There is no sin so great that we are not. I never know how many are going to be here. Last Sunday we had so many here. We had 16. Is there anybody who does not like grape juice? Absolutely do not like it.
Absolutely not.
Okay, I thought of you.
And thought,
Okay, if you are done with my body, would you come up and get some juice? Juice, that's okay.
no,
You don't want toothpaste either?
I don't like water.
Okay. Is there water back? No, there's not water in here. We'll go back to our pasture and get a glass of water.
All right.
So, when they shed, what? Oh, yeah. So when they had the real Passover with the 10th plague, they killed a lamb and put blood on the door. So when they kill me, I will shed my blood, just as that lamb had to shed his blood to save those people. I have to shed my blood to save my people. So, drink this in remembrance of the blood that I shed for you. So go ahead and drink your fruit juice. Your juice. And usually we have grape juice. Anybody want another cracker? Want another cracker?
What brand of crackers are those? Those are delicious.
I don't know. Dollar store special.
One day. Original entertainer crackers.
I mean, I saw these juices at the dollar store and I thought, yes. One A. The Last Supper is not over. And our church celebrates the whole Last Supper as in the Bible. How many of you have seen a picture of the Last Supper? It's very famous. I don't have one or I would have brought it. But it's a very famous picture of Jesus at the table with his disciples sitting around. It's very famous. If you go home and go to Google and look at the Last Supper, it'll probably bring up the picture of the Last Supper.
I went to a place, and they actually had a picture of the Last Supper, but somebody actually sewed it out with it, and it looked exactly like what the real picture looks like.
Someone's very talented. So then Jesus said, he took a towel and he took a basin of water and he washed their feet. Now, here is the King, Jesus, washing ordinary people's feet. What lesson is there in that?
That Jesus put it on for us, maybe?
Okay, but we are to consider ourselves as servants. We are not to lord ourselves over others. We are to consider ourselves as servants. Here is Jesus washing their dirty feet. They probably wore sandals, and they came in and they were dirty, but Jesus washed their feet. Peter said, not my feet only, but my hands and everything else. And Jesus said, no. No, I'm just washing your feet. Peter is kind of an activist, isn't he? He's like, he's always got something else to add. Sorry to say he did betray Jesus, as you all know, 3 times. And then he felt absolutely terrible, as we all do when we sin against God. So yeah, our church, most churches don't do this anymore, and I'm so surprised when I joined this church. I came from a church that did do it, but I was surprised that this church did it, and I really think that.
My old church did it, and they would, every Easter, they would pass around with a ladder, and then they just around little cups of grape juice that they had special holders on the back of the where you could put the little cup, and then there's another little section to put your piece of bread. That was before COVID hit.
Oh, yes, yes.
I remember 2 years ago at this church, we actually were supposed to wash our feet. Like other people